Hello there. Sunday, I was coming back from Easter Mass, 6 a.m. Mass, and I turned on NPR, and I guess it was a woman rabbi discussing with Krista Tippett, that nice program that Miss Tippett has on religious and spiritual subjects, and the other lady, whom I assume to be a rabbi, was talking about the name of God, and there was some allusion to the meaning of the Hebrew in Exodus as indicating I will be, and this in the discussion, and according to the speaker or speakers, both of them, I guess, were on the same page, had to do with God becoming, which is kind of like a very popular idea. I guess process theology, etc. I remember a famous philosopher named Carney. That's how it's pronounced. I think it's spelled Kearney. I forget his first name. Who studied under Derrida, Jacques Derrida, great thinker, whom I heard in person in Canada, and Paul Ricoeur, another great thinker, spoke about God basically as himself oriented toward eschatology, oriented towards the end, of the consummation of things or something. And I was asked, and I know I've spoken about this in some other videos, I was asked by the seminary where I taught to provide a response to this speaker's thesis that had been, or lecture that had been circulated. This is a philosophy day that the minor seminary in Miami held, or maybe still holds every year. They invite a prominent philosopher. And so I tried to bone up, since it had to do with Exodus 3:14, the famous encounter between um, Moses and God. I'm sorry, I got some sort of phone message. Uh, my bailiwick being the Bible. Um, I you know um, boned up on the uh, you know commentaries on this passage, or on God's becoming or not becoming. And I went to Michael Fishbane, who is, I think, I called it the heavy hitter. I got the heavy hitter to bone up for this response to Carney. And basically, what I got from Fishbane was the idea that anything we expect God to do in the eschaton, in the last day, depends on what he has already proven to have done in the beginning. So there are many instances. Gunkel famously spoke about the end corresponds to the beginning, reductio in principium, etc. So it's not so much that God is becoming, but rather than that God is manifests himself in the Bible as already having done things which become the basis for our trust and hope that he will accomplish what he has promised. So that eschatology depends on protology. The study of the end depends on your study of the beginning, not proctology. That's a different subject. So I said to myself during that drive, I think I'll, do a little video on the name of God, because I had written an article for the Florida Catholic many years ago on the name of God, and I liked it. And my main inspiration, giving credit always where credit is due, is Professor Blenkingsop, who died, now a couple of weeks ago or something. Um, and and so I his idea is that the name of God is mostly a verb and not an actual name, as is well known in the ancient world and especially in the Bible. The authority to name or to have a name is tantamount to having power over the person's name. I think the rabbi felicitously used the expression, God doesn't have a handle, which is a great word. I mean, I guess the handle was what the truckers in the CB, whatever those radios were, in back in the day. Handle was the name that the truckers went by, so that you have to you have to understand that having the name of somebody gives you certain power over them. And in exorcisms, what is your name? And Jesus famously in Mark 5 asks the conglomerate demoniac, what is your name? And he says, Legion, because we are many. And there's a little symbolism in that name, Legion, in respect to the Romans, etc. But if you went to my website by Googling Emilio Chavez Bible Explainer, it'll say not secure because I haven't paid the money you need to have it be secured, and some computers block it, but whatever. On the very first page, I have short notes on biblical topics, and under T for the, I have this article, The Name of God. And I wanted to base myself on this article and also on a handout I prepared for class on the name of God in Exodus, to give a little presentation, um, of on the name of God, inspired by this NPR program. And so the interesting thing is that if we were to look at Exodus 3, and by the way, I've been reading the Jewish Study Bible, 2014 second edition, which I find to be incredibly good. And I just read the note to this passage in Exodus. And uh, what's interesting about Exodus is that when Moses has this burning bush experience in Horeb, which is another name for Sinai, uh, God says, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses covered his face, etc., because he feared to see God. This is considered to be an Elohist theme, an E theme in the four sources documentary hypothesis of the Pentateuch: Yahwist, Elohist, Deuteronomist, and priestly. Yahweh says he's seen the affliction of his people in Egypt. He has heard their cry. He has come down to free them and to make them go up to a good and spacious land flowing with milk and honey, etc. And Moses says, "Who am I to go to Pharaoh?" This is very appropriate for the Passover holidays we're celebrating. I don't know what day we're on now, the 8 that are celebrated outside of the land of Israel. He says, "I will be with you, and this will be for you the sign that I send you when I uh, take out my people from Egypt." So that it's very interesting that even there, God says, "I will be with you." Eye imach. So that this is really the fundamental thing we should keep in mind. God says in various places, and here especially, Eye imach. I am or will be imach, with you, singular. Imanu, El, with us. Imanu instead of imach. El, God, with us, you understand, is God, the Emmanuel from Isaiah 7:14. So that when you refer to God as Eye, or when God refers to himself as Eye, he's simply saying, "I am," but in Hebrew it can also be, "I will be." And it can also, like in Spanish and other languages, it can mean I am in the sense of my nature, or I am in the sense of a verb, to be. And so in this name of God in Exodus, which I don't think is in my website, it was a handout. God says this to Isaac in Genesis 26, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, in Genesis 26:3, he says to Isaac, "Don't go down to Egypt, stay in the land that I will indicate to you. I will assist you," etc. And this is where I go wrong. This translation says, "I will assist you," but it really says, "We'eye imak," and I will be with you. You see how even a good translation leads you astray. I'm not looking at the Hebrew except in my annotations to the Bible, so I would have missed it had I not done that. Then in 31:3 of Genesis with Jacob, he says, "Go back to the land of your fathers, to your homeland, and I will be with you." And also in Deuteronomy 31:23, there is God speaking to Joshua in Deuteronomy 31:23, saying, very interesting, "Be strong and courageous, because you will take the Israelites to the land." It's very interesting. It's all related to entering the land of the promised land that I have promised under oath. I don't know what the Hebrew says here, because this word promise is not really quite under, a Hebrew word, but promised under oath, says the translation, and I will be with you. The same eye imak. So here you clearly have a future. I will be with you. It's like a promise to remain or to be with you, especially in arduous undertakings. So that when God and Moses are dialoguing in Exodus 3, and Moses says to God, when I come to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? And God said to Moses, Eye Asher Eye. The Jewish Study Bible considers this to be the explanation of God's name or other famous name, Yahweh, before that other famous name is given. So that it says God discloses his proper name preceded by its explanation. So this Bible is calling Yahweh God's proper name, which, I mean, it does say, this is the name that you will, invoke me with for all generations. This shall be my name forever. This is my appellation for all eternity. And, you know, um, whether that's a name or not is something we want to discuss a little further. Obviously, it functions as a name, but it's not really a handle to control God. And the vicissitudes, the sort of the life of this name, as you may know, uh, became it became a name that could not be pronounced because of its the great reverence that it should be treated with. Many Jews say Hashem, the name, or Adonai, my Lord, and they don't pronounce Yahweh, which the Jewish Study Bible says that's probably how it was pronounced. Except, once a year in Yom Kippur, the high priest could pronounce the name. The book of Sirach talks about that. So this Jewish Study Bible note says that, and it says that the Yod He Vav He is more precisely Yod He Wa He. In other words, the tetragrammaton, the four great letters, would be some like a Y, and then an H, and then a W, and then the other H. Those are the four letters of the name of God. The pronunciation is uncertain because the vowels were forgotten, and they basically combine the vowels of Adonai, my Lord, with the four Hebrew consonants, Yod, He, Vav, Yo, He, and come out with something like Jehovah, maybe, that's why the Jehovah's Witnesses like that, because the vocalization, the vowels inserted into these four consonants don't correspond to the four consonants. They come from another word, Adonai, not from what probably was Yahweh. And so it says here that the Eye Asher Eye, I am who I am, or I will be whom I will be, or who I will be, is actually an explanation of its meaning, probably best translated as I will be what I will be, which is correct. And it says here, my nature will become evident from my actions. So they're still referring to the nature of God. The Greek translation famously says, I am Ho'on, I am the being one. And that's like a philosophical understanding that God exists by himself or of himself, etc. He's self existing, etc. The ground of being, all this stuff. But I prefer to emphasize the verb of accompaniment to understand God as Eye, because not only is God known as Yahweh, which is almost uniformly now translated as the Lord, not in my Jerusalem Bible in Spanish, however, they say Yahweh, 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 there being no W in Spanish. The Jewish Study Bible, I think, uses the four capitals of the four letters. But the fact of the matter is that very interesting, and I don't know the dating of this Exodus passage. I haven't kept up with this, to be honest with you, but my notes indicate that it is considered a J and E conflation. So you have Yahwist, which is the earliest source of the Pentateuch. I think that we can still think of a Yahwist as maybe in the reign of Solomon, let's say 900, some years before Christ or the Common Era. And then the Elohist would be more Northern Kingdom, somewhat later. But certainly Hosea can be dated to the 8th century. And Hosea is a prophet who uses Eye for the name of God in some very interesting and important passages, so that in Hosea, when God tells the prophet to marry a woman of prostitutions, which I believe that to mean a cultic practitioner or even priestess of the Baal fertility cult. The whole polemic in Hosea is between Yahweh and Baal. Who gives Israel the grain, the oil, the wine, etc.? Baal meaning Lord and husband. Who is Israel's true spouse? God has to woo and reconquer the heart of Israel in the desert in Hosea 2. But not only does God tell Hosea to marry a woman of prostitution, it's the same word in Numbers 14 for the infidelities of the Israelites in the desert, whoredoms, etc., in the King James. He tells Hosea to have children, but to name them as special names. And the first name is going to be Lo Ruhama, not pitied. And then you have another child and call him Lo Ami, not my people. And then it says, because you are not my people, and literally, I am not Eye to you. You are not Am to me. You're not people to me, and I'm not Eye to you, or I am not your Eye. So that means that just the simple Eye, I am or will be, can be the name of God. As far as Yahweh is concerned, the actual name, if you will, although, as the rabbi herself said, it's not a handle to control God. This Jewish study Bible says that he answers Moses' questions about what to say to the people. Tell them, Eye, I will be, a shorter form of the explanation. Eye, Asher Eye, I will be who I will be, sent me. This explanation derives God's name from the verb, HWH, a variant form of HYH, to be. And grammatically, Yahweh means he who is, or he who will be, or perhaps more likely, maybe you should have said that first, he who causes things to be. So I see that these scholars in the Jewish Study Bible, many of them, or enough of them, went to Harvard uh, Divinity School or university for a PhD in Semitics, and I know the ideas of that school quite well. I studied there, and I know the work of Frank Cross, who was a big giant. And Frank Cross Frank Moore Cross, I get it, senior moments, famously thought that the oldest expression might have been Yahweh Zebaot, Yahweh of the armies, or Yahweh of the heavenly hosts, his heavenly warriors, if you will, maybe the stars, who sometimes were divinized like deities or something. So that the origin of this Yahweh thing is a rather unknown and not understood form of the verb to be in Hebrew, and it's a causative. It's a verb indicating causation. God is the one who summons or causes to be or appear or emerge the armies, his armies, Yahweh Zebaot, Yahweh of the armies. And so I think that that is also very interesting because you're still with the idea of to be. In my opinion, not so much to be as metaphysical, ontological ground of being, the being one, hoon in Greek, the one who exists of himself, etc., but rather a being, if you will, God, can't get away from that word being, who will be with us, or will be with his people, or will be with those who belong to him. In Hosea, in fact, when the restoration takes place, when salvation comes, etc., then all these things shall be reversed, and lo ruhama, not pitied, will be called pitied. The people will be called pitied, and lo ami, not my people, will be called ami, my people. And I will be Eye again. It's kind of like a redundant. No, I will be whom I will be. There you go. Again to my people. So that, yes, in chapter 2, it'll say that the number of the children of Israel will be like the sands of the sea that cannot be measured or counted. And in the same place where I was telling them, not my people, it will be said, children of the living God. And your sister, your brothers will be called Ami, my people, and your sisters will be called Ruhama, pitied one. So that is quite interesting. God with us. I don't know that He's becoming as we are becoming, but He's certainly dynamically accompanying us and trying, I guess, to hold us by the hand, even though sometimes we resist. So I find this Jewish study Bible quite helpful, and I like, just like with N.T. Wright, I'm reading what I think is first class stuff, with which I happen to agree 100% because I've been studying this for almost 50 years, and I have studied in some very good places, and there's tremendous common ground now. The Jewish Study Bible says it explicitly. It's hard to distinguish Jew, Christian, Catholic, and maybe even atheist Bible scholars who are using their reason, faith and reason, each having its proper role, um, instead of these ideologies that make up whatever crazy stuff some guy came up with, and they all come up with something different. Um, and I wanted to finish on a slightly different note that sort of proceeds from this. In the Jewish Study Bible, I just finished one of the articles, uh, The Religion of the Bible, by a rabbi who teaches at Jewish Theological Seminary in New York, Stephen A. Geller, who studied at Harvard University. And I read his lengthy discussion of the religions of the Bible, as Zioni Zevit one time said, or biblical religion as a development or something that is based on an earlier type of biblical religions, if you will. And I found the conclusion incredibly important. He talks about how many contradictions there are in the Bible and how the Jews have always been comfortable sort of letting things stand side by side. For example, the two creation accounts, the priestly or holiness school first account of 7 day creation, if you will, Genesis 1, followed by a Yahwist account, anthropomorphic, God, walking in the garden and taking an afternoon stroll in the breeze of the day, etc., and talking the serpent and all that. Whereas the first chapter is abstract, symmetrical, very abstract. Doesn't even want to mention sun or moon, just the big star, the small star, and they have functions. They're not beings to worship, Shamash or Yare or anything like that. The moon and the sun and all that in the Old Testament. So this canonical approach looks at the Bible as a library put together a certain way. That's why I prefer the Jewish canon to understand the Old Testament, Genesis to Chronicles. I have a video on that, and maybe more than one. And then literary approach. When I watch movies, and I think the great analogy are movies and God as producer, and then you have a director maybe, and then actors and all these kinds of things. When I watch a movie, I say this is not, a movie does not tell you exactly what might have happened, like if you were filming something live or whatever. A movie tells you what the producer and director and script writer, etc., want you to hear. They may repeat things that seem obvious, but they want to make it clear to the audience what's going on. Normally, the dialogue in a movie or a TV program is not that realistic. It's more to communicate what's going on. It's like a painting. And so this conclusion to this article on the religion of the Bible, uh, talks about uh, an underlying unity amidst the very different traditions, and it is the notion of faith in God, which it says is a very complicated concept. And it says that it probably developed in the Holy War context. Warriors were commanded to have confidence in God's protection, not to fear or let their hearts become weak. Now, this Old Testament stuff, treated this way, sounds to me a lot like Frank Moore Cross, a great giant, a Jewish guy, Herschel Shanks, may he rest in peace, may his memory be a blessing, called him a Presbyterian, the world's greatest Bible scholar. I never had the privilege of uh, taking his classes. At the time, I had no clue what I should have been taking. But I've read his books pretty much, and he's one of those great giants that are great authorities. You don't have to, you can always, question something, but that's pretty high. And then this a man, Stephen Geller, Rabbi Geller, says that there's a secondary element of unity, and it is the prophet, which I will translate as God's messengers, people who speak for God. Moreover, the trust it demands is total and unconditional, also in the prophet. He uses the example, appunto, of the interchange between King Ahaz and Isaiah in Isaiah 7, which we talked about. If you do not have faith, you will not be established. In Isaiah 7:9, which he says it's a pun, a Hebrew word pun, im lo ta'aminu ki lo te amenu. So and he translates literally, if you do not display firmness, you will not be made firm. Now that's incredible, because this word firm in English is the translation of the Hebrew aman, where we get amen, which has to do primarily with something firm. Emet, truth, has to do more with reliable, something that you can lean on reliably, rather than an abstract Greek aletheia, truth, or something from speculation or logics or something. This is a trusting in God with faith, which comes from being firm, which in turn makes you firm. And he says this is a test rather than a confirmation of confidence. The sign, this famous sign, the Alma, the young woman shall conceive and bear a child, a son, and call him Immanuel. With us is God. Biblical faith involves absolute trust in the prophet as well as in God. Now, this goes back all the way to Moses. They believed in God and they believed in Moses. For Jews, you have to believe that Moses spoke to God like a friend. And he says that this mediated type of faith is the essential uniting core of all forms and all major traditions of biblical religion, and the unique contribution of biblical religion to world religion. You also have to have faith in the authenticity of the textual record of past revelation. So even though we know that the Bible started probably with oral stories and traditions and then put into some writings and then meshed together and then edited and re-edited and redacted and all that, with great respect for keeping what was handed down, even though new things had emerged, and the fact that the old things that you keep as having been handed down from of old, exist side by side with newer things that may be very different. Like, for example, does God punish till the fourth generation? The sinner punishes in his children and grandchildren to the fourth generation, or is everyone personally responsible for their own guilt? It's a development. They sit side by side, basically. The Jews are not flustered by the tension and even opposition, says this article, between. Indeed, biblical religion seems to go out of its way to cultivate and display this unity, to express religious ideas in terms of paired themes, intention, even opposition. So that, and this is interesting because there's room here for Christianity. A prophet, when I hear prophet and when I know that most prophets were false prophets, groups of 400, etc., Jeremiah has tremendous battles with the false prophets. When Jeremiah is put on trial, famously, especially for his temple speech in Jeremiah 7, when he's put on trial in Jeremiah 26, his main defense and his main claim to authenticity is that he was sent by God. The false prophets have not been sent. That appears clearly in Jeremiah, problem with Hananiah, etc. I did not send these prophets who prophesy in my name, etc. What's interesting is that the word prophet, the word, the verb to send, is where we get apostle. So an apostle is simply one sent, implied with a message. Jesus was sent. The letter to the Hebrews calls Jesus the apostle of our faith, and then Jesus says he was sent in the Gospel of John, as was John the Baptist sent. So that the Christian faith also has to trust in this mediation. Christianity, we even have to trust in the revelation or the text being transmitted in Greek, which is not what Jesus was speaking, nor was the early church speaking mainly in Greek. That comes a little later, even though it was a lot of bilingualism going on, but it wasn't completely bilingual at all. They were speaking Aramaic, mostly. Jesus was. So then the faith in God, complex, having to do with holy war, which reminds me of the Hindu gospel Bhagavad Gita, which is all about the exhortation to fight, metaphorically expressed as a fight between cousins on the battlefield. But just like jihad in Islam should be with yourself to struggle and fight against your vices, not blow up others in terrorist acts. The notion that you have to fight, and Paul says it in Ephesians, our battle is not with flesh and blood, etc., with principalities and the stars and these kind of things. It's very interesting that through this study, and a guy like Geller, Rabbi Geller in Jewish Theological, which I'm so super impressed now that I read this. Not that I haven't heard for many, many years about it. But these guys, and especially also Stephen Elliott Friedman and others, Richard Elliott Friedman, I guess his name is, they studied at Harvard, and the truth is the truth. You don't have to say, I only study with this little group or this my denomination or some baloney like that, not when it comes to the Bible. But of course, that requires a level of intelligence and maturity that we have to aspire to, or at least respect and listen to. And so it's very interesting to see that we're basically on the same page as long as we're doing things the right way. No shortcuts and no easy oversimplifications, which is what our greatest malady is these days. With that, I'll stop.